Hello and welcome to Conversations with the Voice of Reason. I'm your host, Benjamin Boyce, and today's conversant is Katherine Deves, who is an Australian mother who's long been involved in advocacy for sex-based rights as opposed to gender identity-based rights. We spoke a couple years ago, and in that conversation, we spoke about her early work with Save Woman Sport and her work as a lawyer trying to tackle these issues from that angle. And in this conversation, we continue that conversation and also speak about her run for office in Australia and the amount and intensity of pushback she received for her gender-critical views. If you'd like to hang out more with Katherine, she is a regular contributor to Sky News Australia and has a presence on ye old Twitter. Without further ado, here is Katherine Deves.
Yeah, so where do you want to start?
Well, you ran for office. That's
I
one
did.
one place we could start. But when we spoke almost exactly 2 years, I think it's actually exactly 2 years ago, you were involved in Save Women's Sport Australia.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing
Australasia,
some
yeah.
minimal campaigning and, flirting with getting canceled on Twitter. Eventually you do get canceled on Twitter. You do some TV appearances, and then like all the fame goes right to your head and you're like, I'm going to take over the world. So what's it been like involved in the struggle, and where has the ball moved in the last 2 years with regard to gender issues in your country and specifically your state? Because I know
Right.
you're
Yeah,
in
so
Victoria, is it?
I'm in Sydney, so New South Wales. So things go state by state, as in, the United States or Canada, and then federally. So with respect to my campaign, we actually got the gender debate on the table. So I ran for the Liberal Party, which is our centre-right party. And the issue for which I became known in the election campaign, while it was an issue that was very dear to my heart, and I would have done everything I could when I got to Canberra if I'd been voted in, I was running on the Liberal Party political campaign platform. So there are issues around, cost of living, provision of healthcare, etc. However, when it became apparent that I might be the candidate for the electorate of Warringah for the Liberal Party, I took down my social media, which is what you're advised to do, because you are no longer your own person. You are sort of owned by the party. Your personal opinions, whether they are to do with your work or your personal life, also security reasons. If you've put your kids out there or other family members who might not want to be in the public eye, it's what you do. However, unbeknownst to me, there was a hacker by the name of Travis Brown who's located in Berlin. So he worked with Twitter open source, and we speculate that he had a bot that was capturing each of my tweets in real time. So even when I post something, I go, oh, better just fact check that, or there's a spelling mistake or grammatical error, I'll just delete it and repost it. Those had been captured. So when they're going, oh, there's 6,000, racist, transphobic tweets, it's like, well, half of them were errors that I just took down. That's how for a variety of reasons, we thought they must have been doing that. It wasn't like someone was just sitting there capturing it in real time. Mm-hmm. It must have been a bot. So he had this file, and somehow it made it into the hands of the Australian media. And they sort of cherry-picked certain particular tweets. They took them out of context. They took the ones that were most inflammatory. There were people who were obviously sitting there going through every single conversation I'd ever had, taking things out of context and weaving it all together into a narrative that they then threw out into the public domain. Now, I believe Travis Brown is also involved in that document that's on Google Docs where they list people, gender crits, as they call us, women and men. They list them all their Twitter handles, and then there's a whole lot of how to dox or get them kicked off social media, or how to get them fired from their jobs. It's a whole how to cancel people. So I believe he's involved in that project. So this was a targeted attack. It wasn't, oh, look what we did. We stumbled across tweets in the Wayback Machine. That was a lie. We went through the Wayback Machine. Those tweets weren't there. They got uploaded later by someone who is associated with Travis Brown. But the gender issue had not been in the public domain except for, rah-rah, brave and stunning and positive stories. very little balanced reporting or
So mostly
criticisms or
affirmative, transition affirmative.
absolutely.
Yeah.
So, with respect to sex self ID or whether it's medical transitioning of children, it was all, and they have their formula where they go, oh, look, the Royal Melbourne Children's Hospital is doing this. It's so great. And here's someone whose life was terrible and they're being bullied. And now they've transitioned and now everything's great and they're not going to kill themselves. So, that sort of formula that they follow in the media, there was a lot of that. We also have an organisation called ACON. I think I might have spoken about that last time. So that's the AIDS Council of New South Wales. So that's the equivalent of Stonewall UK. So they've replicated what Stonewall did with diversity, inclusion, equality training, and
So,
then having that.
but they pivoted from AIDS to gender?
Yes, yes. So they have a massive budget. They get, I think it's up to about 13 million annually directly in a special grant from the New South Wales Minister for Health. They get about another 3 to 4 mil in other health grants. They only get about a few thousand, like I'm talking 3, 4, 5,000 in actual membership dues. So basically, it functions as an arm of government,
Yeah.
but it has all their diversity, inclusion, equality training. That they get all the government departments to sign up to, the big corporates, ASX 200 companies, the law firms, the universities, the police, everybody, federal, state, and now they're attacking the councils. They also have an arm called Pride in Sport, where they're going to all the sporting organisations and getting them to put in policies that prioritise identity over biological sex for competitive categories. So they are essentially pushing what they call diversity, equality, inclusion, but it is that LGBTIQ-centric worldview, specifically to do with identity and sexual orientation, and that should take precedence over everything else.
I'm sorry,
So
you
pretty
just
much
said
like
LGBTIQ. I never heard it
whatever it is.
formulated. I know.
LGBTIQA plus, whatever, it changes all the time. The rainbow people. So as we know, they sort of piggyback on the legacy goodwill from the gay rights movement,
Yeah.
but it's to do with identity and prioritising a declared self-image of gender identity over anything to do with biological sex. And then also desexing, I don't like to say degendery, but desexing any policies like maternity policies, provisions for women on the basis of all of that. They want to get rid of all of that. And we pay for all of this as taxpayers. So ACON has been doing that, and they've really steamed ahead with that since I spoke to you last. So we had women, myself included, put in FOIs on all the government departments to see exactly how far this goes. I think it was the Federal Attorney General's Department. Their submission to ACON was like 500 pages. I mean, they go to extraordinary lengths to be compliant with those programs. Even to the point where the head of the ABC, which is the Australian equivalent of the BBC, was on a float dancing at the Mardi Gras Gay and Lesbian Parade, and he didn't get points for that. For some reason, he didn't. I don't know. He wasn't
What do you mean
promoting them well
points?
enough. So on the compliance, so when they get their compliance, they get points. So you get, if you say at University of Melbourne, they hired a gender compliance officer, whatever that means. They get paid $100,000, and it's basically someone has a complaint about someone misgendered them, and they need to had their hand held as they put through a complaint against that professor, or they want to transition. They got, I think, 2 points for that. So you think, how much is that costing the University of Melbourne to actually run that person and all the associated costs beyond their salary? But if you get one piece of media that reflects your business that's saying, oh, you're not on side with all this gender stuff, you'll lose 20 points. So it's,
Oh, wow. Okay. How many points do you start with? 0 or 100, and then it goes up and down from there? Or do you know how it's
and year
allocated?
on year, well, it's so you basically platinum, gold, silver, bronze. It's year on year, so you can't build on where you were the year before. It starts fresh every year. So
Oh.
And then at the end of it, all the points are collated and they pick their best performers, and you'll get to go to a lovely corporate dinner and you get handed your trophy, and there you go.
And for the worst
Um,
ones, you get put in some sort of like pit with alligators or crocodiles. You guys have crocodiles, right? Stingrays.
I think you just signed up as a member. You don't get all the accolades.
Oh, okay.
So,
But if you do
yeah.
them wrong, they don't necessarily punish you, or they just
Oh no, you'll be penalised if
there's a
you
naughty
don't.
list.
Yeah, so you'll lose points. Um, So it's they've created this whole industry that's funded by the taxpayers, that they sort of, the taxpayers pay for this organization to exist. Then they get all the government departments to pay them for the privilege of being assessed on this basis. Then they pay to go to have the training and pay to go to the awards night. Like it's a real grift in my
Yeah,
view.
it's a
Yeah.
state religion.
Yes, exactly. A secular religion.
So those two topics, I want to go back to this guy who was targeting you. So as
Oh,
you're running
Chinese
for
man.
office, did you have a team? You have some people, you're a part of the party, but do you have people working with you, strategists and stuff like that? I'm just wondering how you deal with that sort of targeted takedown. Like, what was your guys' strategy? What was your personal strategy or response to that? And
So my candidacy, I was what they called a last minute captain's pick. So I sort of threw my hat in the ring, not expecting to be chosen as the candidate. Usually they have a plebiscite within the conference, within the local electorate, and all the members of the Liberal Party vote. But there's a whole lot of argy-bargy. It even got litigated, and the Prime Minister, the New South Wales Premier, and another high-ranking female in the Liberal Party had, I think it was 9 people as last minute captain's picks, and I was one of them. So it was quite a shock to me to actually get picked and get the phone call. So then we had to scramble to find a team. And no, it's not like they provide you with salaried, analysts and strategists that know what they're doing. It's literally volunteers. So fortunately, I had some incredibly smart people who believed in what I was doing, and actually stepped away from their paid work to dedicate time to my campaign. We had to organise the volunteers. A lot of the people who were Liberal Party members in the electorate were unhappy at me being picked, so they sort of went, "We're not being involved." But there were also a lot of
why
people.
was there like
Oh,
the cut of your
they,
jib or what?
they were denied the right to vote for the candidate because I was a captain's pick. So the Prime Minister picked me rather than the local members getting to vote on their candidate.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
So
okay.
so I was flamed for being captain's pick, whereas now we've got people complaining that there have been these plebiscites and they don't like the candidate and they're like, it should have been a captain's pick. So it's just political
Politics. Yeah.
argy-bargy. Yeah. But I had a core group of people around me, a sort of a real bunch of misfits. We came, lots of different levels of experience, different ages, but they believed in the cause and they believed in the party. So we sort of had to hit the ground running. I had 6 weeks to campaign, one week was Easter. So everyone sort of goes offline in Australia. And then we had the media attacks. And so my tweets got into the hands of a journo called Samantha Maiden, who works for news.com, and also there was another guy by the name of Cam Wilson who worked for Crikey, and they sort of seemed to be
Wait, it's an
the
outlet
main
called
offenders.
Crikey.
Crikey, yeah, it's a left-wing publication. And Samantha Maiden, I don't think she was like, what struck me was when they were coming after me was I thought, I'm not the story here. What I am saying is the story. What is happening to children is the story. What is happening to biological reality and this influence over our law and policy, this removal of I was like, that's the story, not
Yeah.
me. But what
Yeah.
I'd said on Twitter, the words that I said became the story. And it was difficult because I was a local candidate. You're allowed to do local media, but if you're going to do national media, it has to run through national headquarters because they have they obviously have their strategy and their policies that they want to focus on. And really, it's only like the Prime Minister and the ministers who should be speaking to national media. So I was stuck in this weird situation where I couldn't go out and defend myself.
Oh, yeah.
So fortunately, the Turban Army came on board and fought really hard for me on Twitter. A lot of women who would never support the Liberal Party, who very much come from the left, came on and fought hard. And I cannot say how grateful I am to those women for setting aside those differences and standing up for me, because it was pretty horrific what they were doing and what they were saying. I was being pursued by the paparazzi, it was just madness. Paparazzi outside my house.
Did you revel in the attention? I mean, I guess you can't go international, but it could be tempting to like, okay, well, I'm going to be a personality. If they're going to turn me into a personality, I'm going to be like you can Kardashian your way through this whole thing, just embrace
Well, but the thing was I couldn't rebut the things that they were saying. And they were just taking what I'd said and going, oh, she said that children are surgically mutilated and sterilized, right? Which is something that I said because it's true when they transition children. Yeah, and that all turned into a headline. I mean, they went through everything. They were finding photos from me back at Mardi Gras in like 1997 and going, she went to Mardi Gras, but she's a homophobe, and all sorts of crazy accusations. I was explaining how I could see parallels between the censorious nature of, the public discourse these days, the silencing of people losing their jobs, talking generally about like totalitarianism and fascism. And then I used an analogy about sort of the Third Reich. And then it became all about the Holocaust and, which she's calling, comparing trans women to Nazis or the Holocaust. And I couldn't respond because these arguments, as you know, Benjamin, are quite nuanced. They're complicated. But they were just taking bits and turning it into headlines. And I just didn't really have the opportunity to sit there. I think in hindsight, if I'd been able to say, can I just speak to some of these main outlets? Just let me have the conversation. Let me answer the questions that they want, and then they'll pivot somewhere else. So, you might say revel in the attention, but I'm not an extrovert by nature. And they were coming after my brother in New York. Yeah. They were harassing my children. My partner, who's an ex-cop and he's a tree lopper by trade. He has a tree removal business. He's a bloke, provider, protector. So the fact he had to stand there and he couldn't do anything, and just had to watch as they sort of had this media assassination going on was really hard for him. So, and then there were threats made that were alarming, and they were reported to the police and our federal police. But I didn't want to go in there for the day and sit there going through all the threats, the big pile of them, and say, this is how it made me feel. I feel threatened. I want to press charges. I want you to investigate. It was hard enough as it was. And my advisor said, I don't see the utility in you doing that. You're already distressed enough. You do this, you're going to go to pieces. So I said to the police, I'm happy for you to know that this is happening, but I just don't want to make it an official complaint. But then the story became, we've rung the police and we've rung the AFP, and there's no official complaint there. She's lying about the threats. So everything I did was wrong. Like someone would manage to spin it in a way that put me in a bad light. And that was really hard. And then when they came after my family and some of the friends that had supported me in my candidacy and it was impacting their jobs, and I did one day I did end up in hospital in such distress, having chest pains, and my friend said, we're not messing about with this, we're taking you to hospital.
Yeah.
And people of my age presenting with myocarditis if they've had the COVID injection. So they took it seriously. I lost a lot of weight. I couldn't eat.
Wow.
There were also threats coming from within the party. There were high-profile members of the party who were disparaging me to the press and calling for me to be disendorsed. My opponent here in Warringah, who is an ex-Olympian, she won the first Australian medal at the Winter Olympics. So someone that you would think would be willing to protect biological sex categories for sport for females. She came out, she actually had the audacity to call parents who might have concerns about their daughter's sports transphobic. Yeah. I had people within my own campaign who are undermining our efforts. So we figured out who they were and asked them
Good
to leave.
goodness. This is like
Yeah, and
all out war.
it was, and this is before I could even go out and campaign. So, look, I will admit, like there was a couple of times huge distress, just complete breakdown. But I thought I don't like bullies. I'm going to keep fighting. If I get disendorsed, there's nothing I can do about it. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to dress as the candidate, go out there, talk to the people in the community, go to the events that I've been invited to. Just put one foot in front of the other. I'll let my people manage the social media. And they're like, don't look at the papers. Do not look at the papers. But sometimes you just can't help yourself.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, they're saying this today. And it's like, no, just keep going. But things did get so crazy, like in the media, and when the paparazzi was, chasing my children, and there were the death threats. So I did go to the party. I said, you need to help me. Like, this is out of control. I don't know what to do. So they sent me 24-hour security, and I took it because when I was showing up to places, there would be like media scrums. There were the threats. I didn't, it was, I felt under siege. So when they said, do you want security? I went, yes, I'll take it. So I had some guys who turned out knew my partner through his ex-cop connections. And they were amazing. They just shielded me. They drove me around. They literally picked me up off the floor when I was in pieces. There are a few
Wow.
people that would sort of come for me on the street and they'd stand in
Yeah.
front of me. And so I'm endlessly grateful to them. And then I did at one point ring the Prime Minister and just said, this is completely out of control. I've got people undermining me in the campaign. I don't know what to do. Help me be the candidate. And to their credit, they did send me a media advisor up from another state. So he was great. So he sort of came on board and helped me. But that's not normal for the party to provide a media advisor to just a normal
Yeah.
candidate.
I
And look,
would
and then
assume that I don't know. I don't know how politics works out there, but they could have used that as a huge pivot, like playing like the damsel in distress angle and like put you in the national spot, like lean into all that controversy and own it. And I mean, not that that would be good for you. It would just like make you even more infamous and stuff. But I don't know how politics works out there, but it just
I
seems like you
don't.
were such a lightning rod for so much attention.
Yes.
Why? Because you were against this one issue? Was it all about the gender thing, or was there another threat that you posed?
I think it was that. So this was the first time that conversation really entered the national public consciousness in a way that it was being critiqued.
Okay.
And it is very divisive because obviously people have only heard the brave and stunning version. And then they were sort of painting me in a particular light. She's a right wing nut job. She's a transphobe. She's a homophobe. She's all these things. When really I'm just sitting here going, I'm a lawyer. I'm a mum. I don't think it's right to denude law and policy of biological sex. I have gay and lesbian and trans people in my life, as part of my close group of friends. I don't want to play that card. Oh, I have a gay friend, but like
Yeah.
I do. And that has been the case my entire life. It's just that I saw there were concerns and, yeah, I also think that some of the progressives within my own party, they're called moderates, the left faction, they were upset that I had been chosen as the candidate. And I think they just thought that this was easy for them to, take pot shots at me. And then I was blamed for some of the surrounding electorates that had middle-aged white men who were incumbents. And they were, I think, on the moderate side. So they saw me sort of being the center of all this focus where you're being called a transphobe and a homophobe. So they wanted to distance themselves from me in that regard. And they all lost by margins a lot bigger than me. So,
Really?
I think it was 13%, 14% swing against them.
Yeah.
With everything that was thrown at my campaign, we only had a 6% swing against us. So
Yeah. One
I
wonders if
think
they would have stood up.
Mhm.
they would have shown character, and then that would have been more in line with your party's, core values, maybe.
That's right. So our party it's a bit in the wilderness right now. We don't hold power in any state, I think, except New South Wales, and we've got a state election coming up. We don't hold it federally. Sort of Labor's taking over, but it's because we're not really standing for anything. And there's a lot of conflict between the Conservatives and the moderates, the two factions within the party. And they sort of just don't seem to be taking a position on a whole lot of cultural, social issues. And people say, oh, this is just a fringe issue. And I think, well, not really. I mean, this is the cultural revolution of our time. To replace sex with identity is a major thing, and it impacts so many aspects of life, as we know: children, education, health, prisons, language, media, everything. So while it's, when you look at things like maybe national security or cost of living, but when you're looking at, socio-cultural factors, this is pretty important. And I think if that actually just held the line, and people within our party had actually been educated as to the other side of the story, even if you don't particularly agree with someone, if you see a conviction politician, you know what they stand for, they make that very clear. You might be attracted to that because at least they're telling you the truth. At least they're standing for something. So I think that was a real missed opportunity, personally, for our party. I really wish they'd stand up on this issue.
When was the election held?
So that was back in May.
Of 2022?
Yeah. So
What
6 months ago. Yeah.
The COVID response, how did that impact the political domain? Was everybody on board with the amount of lockdowns that you guys did, and like the drones flying over and telling people to get off the beach stuff? Did the Liberal Party stand up against that and make that a platform?
Well, I think by the time the election campaign came around, everyone had COVID fatigue. Like, everyone was just sick of it. We just wanted to get back to normal life. Obviously, during the actual pandemic, aside from what's happened in China, the state of Victoria, which is actually a Labor government, they had the most draconian lockdowns, I think, around the world. People getting fined for the most extraordinary things, couldn't leave your house, the schools were shut down, people not being able to go and see their dying relatives. It was really, at times, very draconian. And I think after that had happened a few times, I think here in New South Wales, we had 2 lockdowns and then a third small one just in my local area, which was at Christmas time. And it was just our local council area that got locked down. People were just starting to get sick of it. They just wanted to get back to normal life. We had a really high uptake on the vaccines. So people were like, well, we're vaccinated, why can't we get back to normal life? But as we've seen now, that obviously the movement against vaccines and all the vaccine injuries, I think all of us know people who've been injured by vaccines to the point where their lives have been seriously interrupted. And I think also seeing what it's done to young people who were locked up. I had 3 little children. The first lockdown, I actually got out into regional a couple of days before they locked down Sydney to my friend's farm. We've got 1,000 acres, so we did the first lockdown out there. So we were kind of all right. But the second one, one of my children was so distressed at not seeing her friends, she kept trying to escape the house, and I literally had to lock the house up because she was trying to run away to see her friends. And you weren't allowed to go visit people. You weren't allowed to go to your friends' houses. And when the teacher did a sort of welfare check on the parents and I said how upset she was, she said, look, the school's still open for people whose parents are in critical work. Why don't you just send her a day a week if she's that upset for her mental health? So I think, there was a lot of fallout with that. We have people, what we call COVID babies, so children who are born during COVID who have not been very well socialised. Because they haven't been around people, and the huge loss of small business. When I was campaigning, that a lot of people had lost their businesses, also with respect to not having workers. So people who had been working months without a break, huge hours in businesses like retail and hospitality. They just didn't have the workers because it was either students, overseas students who all went home, students who had to be locked up in their houses. And then they had something called Job Keeper, which was if you were in a job and the business, I think, lost more than 50% of its revenue or something, the government put you on a payment each week of $750. So it was good in that we didn't have people starving, but you also had people who maybe were only working a few hours a week. But if they were working as a casual in that business and that business was, say, a pub, which was losing all its revenue, then this person, even though they may be making, only working a few hours, all of a sudden they were entitled to $750 a week. So we now have this massive intergenerational debt that we have to deal with. But yeah, a lot of those people who did lose their small businesses, and there were grants from the government, and people tried to trade their way through, but with lockdowns and things like that, for tourism, hospo, that kind of thing, people were really, really hurting.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, that's terrible,
yeah.
but also a political opportunity. So, I mean, why wouldn't the right-ish party completely dominate by saying, we are going to change, we're going to save small businesses. We're going to do all these things. We're going to, liberty, freedom, property, kind of return to basic liberalism. That's what it just seems like a big opportunity, but you kind of have to have cojones to really do that. And maybe those are kind of not as swollen as one would hope.
Well, I think the states that were liberal, so New South Wales, we were pretty good, and we had to open up because obviously Sydney takes all the international tourism. Sydney is usually the first point of call for people coming in. But if you look at like a state like WA, so they're very, very Labor. Labor absolutely has control over there. They just locked down the whole state really hard. But they had a lot of freedoms within the state, and they also have mining resources. So that kept going. So that state actually did really quite well. But after a couple of years, literally locked down the state where you couldn't leave. So I think after a couple of years of that, people started to go a bit crazy because they wanted to see friends and family, things like that. I mean, you sort of look at, say, somewhere like Florida with Ron DeSantis, who just went, nope, it's going to be business as usual. And then, but I think, like, in fairness, it's all very well of us to sit here, with the benefit of hindsight and say, we should have done this, we should have done that. It was a bit of an unknown quantity. And I think people were very afraid. And here in Australia, we do have a very high level of trust in the government. So because the government, like comparatively around the world, maybe things are a bit different after COVID, but generally, the government generally does the right thing for the vast majority of people. We have a very good, education system, even though, there are issues. We have the social safety net with welfare. We have universal healthcare, that kind of thing. We have a lot of governance.
What's your population? What's Australia's population?
So we're like 24 million.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty big area too. And you got to have a lot of resources, and you're kind of detached, so you don't have to worry too much about security or anything like that. So, and everybody's kind of stuck there too. So there's probably a high capacity for people just to be very familiar with one another. It's not just like a melting pot so much as America is. I know you guys do have immigrant populations and stuff, but
so we're sort of, a small population on a country as vast as the United States. But by and large, and, with mining resources and agriculture, we are a wealthy country, and we don't have that extreme poverty that, say, you experience in the US, but then you also have that extreme wealth. We're sort of a little bit more egalitarian.
Okay, yeah.
So people trust the government. So when the government's saying, right, well, this is the decision with mask mandates or COVID mandates or whatever it is, vaccine mandates, people tend to just go along with that without questioning it. So when you look at somewhere like Victoria, I think when you saw the writing down there of the workers, so that was like all of the construction sites had to shut down. So people, if they were on casual or whatever, they weren't getting paid. and, trying to lock families in. You're in a 2-bedroom unit with 3 kids for, 200 days. Things are not going well. There was a lot of people who were becoming very stressed and very distressed, and the rights down there, and how the police were so draconian. So the interesting thing with Victoria is they've never had a police royal commission. So we've had police royal commissions into corruption within the police force, say in Queensland, in New South Wales, but we've never had one in Victoria. So I think the police down there are a little bit more draconian. So when we saw them, arresting pregnant women in their kitchens because they'd posted something on Facebook, or issuing mothers with $1,000 fines because they took their kids to the park on the swings. I think the police definitely really became very deeply authoritarian because they've never had that sort of reckoning like we have in other states with the Royal Commissions, where the police have sort of had to introduce codes of conduct, and they can't sort of completely go off the reservation like they did in Victoria.
But don't they report directly to the governor or whatever the head of the state is called? So aren't they just basically an arm? Isn't their behavior a direct result of somebody's executive decision to act like that?
Yeah, the premier down there. So Victoria is a Labor state. He has, I think it's his 4th term. I think he's just been voted in for. He is very socialist. Their public service has blown out by 30%, I think, since he's taken power. So I think the biggest employer down there is state administration. So a lot of people are reliant on the state for their income. So of course they're going to vote for him. The trade unions are very strong down there. We actually refer to it as, Danistan, and it's very socialist. And
what's their resources down there, generally speaking?
Not really. It's a pretty small state. No. Yeah, a little bit of mining. Definitely some agriculture, some wine, wineries and things like that. But I think state administration is actually their biggest employer down there.
Well, but what do they produce? Like tech? Do they have tech or tourism or something? I mean, how do they generate money for tourism?
Like Melbourne used to be a great city. Not so much. My friend said, Melbourne used to be like that, really classy brunette, like really stylish, classy brunette. And now it's just green hair and nose rings and a grubby black T-shirt. And you're like, yeah, that's pretty much it. It's very woke down there. That's also, we talked about this last time. They were the ones who pushed through that very draconian conversion therapy law. They throw tens of millions of dollars at the Rainbow Lobby. They've built what they call the Pride Centre in a suburb called St Kilda, and it looks like a Scientology cathedral.
Really?
And the Pride Centre, look it up. It literally towers over the rest of the community.
That it's in Pride Centre?
St Kilda, the Pride Centre in St Kilda. So that cost them $25 million.
Okay. Is it just like you go there and you get sodomized or something? Like, what's the activity?
I wouldn't go so far as to say that, but that's where they house all their LGBTIQ plus organisations.
Okay. So it's basically another arm. It's a church. It's a cathedral for this
it's like
state
the
religion.
Pride Church. Yeah, for this state religion. And, Victoria, the debt of the state of Victoria is as big as the next 3 states combined. So it's like, I think New South Wales, Queensland, and maybe South Australia.
Okay.
But population-wise, New South Wales is bigger than Victoria. So they're just spending money like it's water. I
don't really understand. I mean, I guess I don't even understand how the United States work, but how independent are these different states in Australia? Like, can one state just basically bankrupt itself and the federal government comes in and picks up the pieces, or what? Is there any
that's what they're doing.
Or? Okay.
That's what they're doing. But now that we have a Labor in power at the federal level, and we have this nearly $1 trillion national debt, so Victoria is going to have to turn around at some point. I think their debt's like well over $100 billion. So they're going to have to someone's going to have to bail them out. They're going to have to fix that. And usually what happens is you have Labor come in, they go on a massive spending spree, and then Liberal come in because we're seen as better at managing the economy and usually have the budget in surplus. And then we have to come in and clean it up.
Force people to restrain themselves and behave properly and be responsible, and nobody wants that.
No, no one wants to have go out there, take a risk, start a small business. It's much easier being on the public service and,
Yeah,
getting your
that's the
salary
way.
once a month. So we'll
Yeah,
just keep voting Labor. Yeah, it's a real problem.
it's
I don't
weird.
I don't
Okay.
know what's going to happen. Yep. But they just had the state election down there and he got back in. But the problem was the Liberals, as I've said, are slightly in disarray. They don't really know what they stand for. They don't really know who they're representing. They've kind of lost their way a little bit. But as you know, with politics, it swings and roundabouts. So they'll probably be out of power for maybe a couple more election cycles. And hopefully they use that time to pull themselves together and actually stand for something and get
Hmm.
some very, you want to have strong, appealing leaders in there. Yeah.
So what if you were told that you were the person for that job?
Oh God. I think my husband would probably kill me first.
Oh, really?
Oh,
But he's a
it's
tree
just
lopping bloke.
I know, I know. So, look, he just worries what it would do to me, because he
And your
saw what
kids,
happened
yeah.
in the campaign, and
Yeah.
it's a pit of vipers, and you have to be really strong. And I don't really have that killer instinct. So even in the campaign, and I'd
Mm.
say to my advisors, "Oh, da 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 da," and they said, "No, no, what they're doing is this, and they're actually attacking you in this way." And I'm like, "Oh, oh yeah,
Oh,
okay. Oops,
okay.
silly,
You
silly
keep
me.
on
I took them at
looking
face value."
on the bright side. You have a hard time
Yeah,
being
yeah.
really politically Machiavellian and cynical about
Yeah,
power.
fortunately, I
Okay.
have a few people who have very Machiavellian minds, but I'll go to them and they'll have to explain it to me, and I'll be like, "Oh, all right, yeah." But I mean, that's why you have advisors, right? So,
Yeah.
um, oh, look, I'm not sure that would ever happen to me, but I guess if it did, as with being the candidate, you just knock down seven times, get up eight. You just throw yourself into it. You get the best people around you, and you just throw yourself into the job.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So,
big political maneuvers aside, were you terribly disappointed by not being elected in? Or was it a relief? And then what
oh,
happens after you get some recovery time and then get back to work or
look, mixed feelings. Of course, you've worked so hard, and it would have been great to have won and to go in there and, do what I wanted to do, because
yeah.
now we have an independent and she has no power. She sits on the crossbench. So the electorate will be ignored again. There'll be no significant investment, because Labor does hold the balance of power. They don't need to rely on smaller parties to get them over the line. Um, I think also a little bit of relief, because that level of media scrutiny is extraordinary. I think, obviously it dies down. There's some other scandal, something else happens. But it's also quite difficult. You have to grow a very thick skin, and you're running on adrenaline and coffee. And I'd lost a lot of weight. I wasn't in a very good state mentally and physically afterwards. So it was good
Yeah.
to have that time to regroup and sleep. And then I had a major ski injury where I
Oh no.
broke and dislocated my shoulder and had severe nerve damage in my arm, which sort of still hasn't recovered fully. So that derailed me. Oh God, my husband's sending me all these pictures from the kids surfing at the beach. I might just put that. Sorry. So that sort of derailed me a bit. My friends said that's the universe telling you to maybe slow down. So
Yeah.
I was bedridden for quite a while, trying to get on top of that. And for that reason, even though I had job offers to get back into law, I wasn't in a position where I could take them.
Okay.
And then Sky News has been very supportive. So that's owned by, News Limited, similar to Fox News, I suppose, in the United States.
Yeah.
And they were getting me on as a panelist a few times a week.
Oh,
Um, yeah, which has been great. So
is that
also just
fun?
to broaden, yeah, they are so supportive. The producers, the talent, the hosts, they've enabled me to get on there and talk about things other than gender, other things that I'm interested in. With respect to the Australian people and what's impacting them and Australian families, so they've really given me an opportunity to broaden my issue space, and I'm very grateful.
Do you think that that's
And
a path forward to being kind of a pundit kind of person?
it's really fun sitting on the sidelines, criticizing the politicians and criticizing their decisions.
Isn't that fun?
I won't lie. And they like you to say controversial things. They like you to argue with the other panelists. So yeah, it's really good fun. And hopefully we're going to have the election here in New South Wales in March, and they're going to be putting forward an equality bill, which will be similar to the conversion therapy bill down in Victoria. It'll be sex self-ID, it'll be anti-conversion therapy, and it'll probably be further hate speech laws for, vilification, if you go against the prevailing progressive paradigm.
How
So
tight? How
that
tight is your speech controlled? Do you get like
so
pulled over for
it
tweeting in your state?
yeah, it's a real hodgepodge, because it's at state level. We have discrimination law at state level and also at federal level. And it's all sort of different. Sometimes the states copy what's happened federally, whereas here in New South Wales, we have specific transgender vilification laws. So, yeah, so if you are charged with that, we also have a statutory defence, which is if you are talking about it in an academic way for public interest, or you're reporting on facts that actually happen.
Yeah.
If someone says, oh, you're vilifying a person who's claiming to be trans, you can say, well, you can rely on that. But as we know, if someone brings a complaint like that, the process is the punishment.
Yeah.
So we actually have had people captured by those laws going through tribunals. We had a case here. You'll love this. It was going to be Giggle versus Tickle. And this was going to be the definitive case between biological sex and gender identity. So
Which
Sal
one's Giggle
Grover,
and which one's Tickle?
so Sal Grover is a women's advocate. She had a startup, a platform, social media platform called Giggle, which she only allows biological females on. And they do that using AI technology in real time. And she said, 99% of the time we're right. Sometimes a male will slip through, but generally with the way they conduct themselves, they'll be flagged by other users and we'll kick them off pretty quickly. Tickle is a person, Roxy Tickle. So this is a male person. He stood up as a spokesperson for Hockey Australia in allowing males with a gender identity to compete in female hockey teams.
I'm sorry, but Tickle is just such a groomer name. It's like...
Look, kudos to him for his name. You walk around with a name like that, you've got to have some chutzpah. So Roxy was upset that he was not able to get onto the Giggle platform. So he brought a complaint to the Australian Human Rights Commission saying he was being discriminated against on the basis of his gender identity. And Sal's saying, well, I'm allowed to have a female-only social media platform. So bring it on, Tickle. And the complaint, she refused to back down at the Human Rights Tribunal, where Tickle was asking for, they always ask for this, a public apology, to purge your social media, to be re-educated with sex and gender. And Sal's like, I'm a pregnant woman. I'm in my late 30s. I know what sex and gender is, not doing that. And of course they asked for money because it's a grift. And she just said, no, not doing it. So he went and filed in the federal court. And she had a team of really great lawyers and barristers who were prepared to fight this and to say that gender identity actually doesn't belong in our federal legislation. There's no constitutional validity. And there was a great argument that we had for that. But then Tickle withdrew the complaint. So I don't know whether we can only speculate. Maybe someone said, mate, this is going to cost, $1 million. You might lose your house. Or if the women win, it means they have to remove gender identity out of the discrimination law, and you've just lost us, the gender identity people. You've just ruined everything we fought for. So I don't know if he was going to refile. I sort of heard rumours that maybe he was, but anyway, it's sort of dead in the water now. But here in Australia, to get rid of gender identity, because they keep putting it into federal law and also state law, I think we're going to have to fight it out in the High Court. That's how we're going to defeat it here in Australia. Yeah, because the legislation, they just keep putting it in.
Are there any other identities that have specific protections on them as much as the transgender identities about controlling how people talk about them?
Look, we have discrimination law on the basis of race, age, disability. We do have the Sex Discrimination Act, which was for biological sex, but then by slotting in gender identity, now you put it in conflict. And as we know in practice, gender identity takes precedence. but no, gender identity is absolutely obtaining, favoured status, and the fact
Yeah.
that it is sort of it's not innate, it's fluid, it's subjective, it's whatever you want it to be. The fact that something like that has more protections than, say, they tried to get a religious discrimination bill through, and you have less protections for your religious beliefs or absence of religious beliefs than you do for gender identity. So they kind of stuffed that one up when they tried to get it through. Like, I'm a lapsed Catholic. I'm not religious myself, but I believe people should have protections on the basis of their religion. Also, if you don't want to believe in that religion, and also, freedom of belief and freedom from belief, which I think would capture this gender identity stuff. So I think if they put up that legislation, because they tried and it failed, we really should have that. And then that would sort of be like a Maya Forstater protection, that you go, well, I don't believe in gender identity and I have protections under the law on the basis of this piece of legislation. But I don't know, they just don't seem, the legislators just don't seem to either get the nuance of it all, or they believe the gender ideologues. So
Yeah.
it can be quite, like, it's confusing, it's complicated. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, intentionally so, but I guess part of what you've learned to do over the last 2, 3, 4 years is to communicate this nuance and this complexity. Do you do any direct lobbying yourself? You go to the barristers or the legislature or whatever, or you kind of shake them up, or you put them under pressure one way or
So I
another?
have appeared at a parliamentary inquiry. I've made submissions to parliamentary inquiries. I've written to politicians. I have my presence on social media, and I also, whenever I get the chance to speak publicly, but I always take it. And I'm happy. I've sort of been adopted by, I guess, more the conservative side of things.
Are you
Um,
comfortable in the conservative camp?
Look, they are very supportive. I do have to be upfront, and I say, look, I believe in reproductive choice. I voted for same-sex marriage. I'm actually not married to my husband. We're going to get married 2024, but we're technically de facto. So as long as you are clear on those things, we can agree to disagree on certain things. But if you'll have me, absolutely. And I think, it's not so much a left-right divide, but it's sort of like you've got these progressives who want to upend society, and have identity be the paramount characteristic that we're all, judged on or measured on or whatever. And then you have everyone else over here, and it's a real hodgepodge of left and right, people who believe in biological reality and protecting the family and that kind of thing. So even though you say conservative, it doesn't necessarily mean that, if you
Yeah.
know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's so
Yeah. I mean, you guys
confusing.
are also
Yeah.
Australia too, so it's a little bit more liberal compared to the United States.
Yeah, our centre right and centre left do not go as far on the continuum as you guys do over there. And, in this space, I mean, one thing I'm incredibly grateful for is, running in the campaign, I don't regret it. The people that I've met, the connections that I now have, the being able to listen to other people's stories as well, and their problems and what's important to them, it's broadened my horizons immeasurably. And, I speak to people who are very, very, sort of hardcore, Christians. They're very pro-life. And it's fascinating hearing why they feel that way. And then on the other hand, I have friends who are, separatist, Marxist lesbians who've been fighting in the trade unions their whole life. And we're able to have these really interesting conversations because we have, such different opinions, but we respect each other. And it's really broadened and enriched my life. And I'm so grateful for that. I will never regret that. Yeah.
Do you do much writing, or are you more of a public speaker kind of person?
I've been doing a bit of writing. So writing for The Spectator. I did a big piece on Roe v. Wade. I also did a big piece on the constitutional argument for gender identity, and a few pieces here and there. But I tend to I know with journos, like it's 24-hour news cycle and I'm legally trained. So, I sit there and I think I probably just need to smash it out and not sit there and try and get everything perfect and argue everything perfectly.
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, but I would like to do a bit more writing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It just seems like, especially in the last year, there's just so much story.
Mm.
It's a very biographical period of your life that you're living right now. So I'm just wondering, are you going to write it down? You're going to put it out there? Or?
Yeah. I've been tinkering actually with a book.
Oh,
Yeah, so I thought, just try and maybe do something like Helen Joyce, trans, but from an Australian perspective.
mm.
But then
Trans
also I've
Down
had,
Under.
yeah, pretty much, calling it the sex wars. But I have been advised by a number of people whose judgment I trust. People do want to hear the campaign story. I mean, it's 6 months on, and sort of news cycles turn over pretty quick. But I don't know. I'd be happy to sort of write it down. I have had a couple of publishers express an interest. So maybe that's what's in the new year. Now that I've got full function, well, almost full function in my hand back, and I can
Yeah.
start typing again because I
Are you
couldn't
in
type.
physical therapy for that? Or do you have like
Yeah,
Pilates or
I
something that you do?
Yeah, I had been, but like it's kind of waste. Like the arm is a bit wasted, so yeah, I've got to build the muscle up again.
Oh, okay. Does it tingle
Yeah,
or is it painful or?
yeah, it tingles, and I have
Oh,
to
wow.
be
Okay.
on the nerve pain relief. I tried going off it, and then I went, oh, okay, that was bad. I'll go back on it,
Oh,
but
yeah.
I don't like being on meds.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was I've just never had a serious injury or illness, so that has given me a real
Hmm.
empathy for people who do have disabilities and impaired mobility. It's really confronting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Mm.
is there anything that you do that's, I guess you have a family and you guys
Yes.
sound really sporty, but I'm wondering, do you have any like really geeky hobby that you take immense amount or even a guilty amount of pleasure in? Like, what's the funnest thing that you do that's just the oddballest thing about you?
Oh, the oddballest thing. I mean, I've always been a real nerd, like a real bookworm. Love reading.
Mm.
Quite
Mm.
happy to sit there. I'd go to parties, as a teenager, I'd take my book and I'd go, I'm a bit bored. And I'd go sit there, go on and read a book for a little while. It's like, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I'm just, reading my book. So yeah, I'd say that's probably the geekiest, nerdiest
Is
thing that I
there
do.
like do you have a mastery of a very niche kind of genre that you just got really into? You went way too far with, I don't know, like Chinese, Russian, Mongolian erotica, like highfalutin Victorian novels or
I
something.
think, it's no, I wish I could say that. I would have to say it's the sex and gender identity thing. I've gone really down the
Yeah,
rabbit hole on that one.
yeah,
Reading all the parliamentary papers, all the submissions to all the
yeah.
when they've done the legislative changes, watching all the debates in Parliament. I suppose if you're going to look at it, you take that Malcolm Gladwell measurement of being an expert on something is 10,000 hours. I'd say, yeah, probably got a couple of
Okay.
PhDs in this subject by now.
Well, would that? Do you think that that's going to prepare you to make a brief or something? You think you'll be a part of something major like that, or are you aware of any big legal pushes that are forming in your country?
I am aware of some that are being run, and I am also close to some of the solicitors and barristers who are preparing to fight that, like
Right.
regular contact with these people. So, yeah, we discuss the merits of the argument a lot. So that would probably definitely, I would say, be my niche. And
Yeah.
then, yeah, and then I'm also a big fan of like trashy novels, like chick
Yeah. Like.
lit. Love Jack Reacher. I love,
Oh. Okay.
I
Yeah. I
love
was gonna
Jack
say you should
Reacher.
write like
I don't know why, but yeah.
what's the guy who does all those lawyer books that
Oh, John Grisham.
you should do a
It,
John Grisham thriller about gender. Like take all the legal precedent and then throw some sort of weird drug
oh,
cartel
yeah.
in there and
Yeah. Well, I think, J.K. Rowling did that with her latest book, The Black Ink Heart. She said that that wasn't about the crazy activists in the
yeah.
gender space, but it was like if didn't do it deliberately, then she was very prescient in seeing that coming. So yeah, you could do that, where the sort of people conducting themselves online in such a way and then it translates into reality. It's a fine line, I think.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, maybe I could do that. Maybe I could write a legal thriller in the gender space.
Did you ever think about that? Did you ever write fiction, or have you just been mostly technical, kind of legalistic nonfiction writing,
Look,
reporting
I
stuff?
did a diploma in editing and publishing, which is sort of the lead on to doing a master's in creative writing. So that was years ago before I had children. So I have done a bit of fiction writing, but I think, being legally trained, sort of more interested in the non-fiction, I'll be honest. Yeah.
The fiction might sell a little better, but you never know. You might hit one out of the park. Helen Joyce's book's doing very well, so.
Yeah, it really is. And I think, look, and Holly Lawford Smith down here has done one on gender critical feminism. Holly is a professor of political philosophy, so it's quite an academic book. So if you're very interested in that topic, she's done a brilliant job. She had real trouble getting that published, but it finally came through. But what I like about Helen's book is that if you're just a punter and you're just kind of interested and you don't necessarily have an academic or legal training, it's very approachable in that way. So, so there's a bit of a gap in the market for that in Australia, I'd say.
She's one of the good journos.
Helen Joyce?
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, she's so bright. Yeah. Yes. And she speaks in a way that just... When she did that interview with Jordan Peterson, I mean, that was fascinating. But they did it in such a way that you could understand it if you were just a sort of ordinary person. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Katherine, I know you probably have some kids to get ready for. Maybe I don't know how you deal with all the sand. There's probably you have some probably expert vacuum tips and tricks that someday you could tell me about.
The house is just full of sand and wetsuits and wet towels and swimming costumes. It's just the way it is. Yeah.
It sounds. What's the temperature about? What's your weather like right now?
So it's really, we've had some 30-degree days. So what does that translate in Fahrenheit? So isn't
80s,
it times 2
70s?
plus 20 or something? Yeah. So sort of 80s and 90s. And then today's really humid and sticky. So it's just, it's just sweating. Right. So they've been sending me pictures from down at the beach. So I just wait for them to come home and fill my house with sand again. Yeah.
Yay. Well, I'm sorry it took 2 years to get you back on, but this time I really needed to sneeze, but I held it back in because last time I accidentally coughed on film and I had to re-edit the whole thing. Right. And I apologize for having kept that in the recording. That was really disrespectful of me, but I think this one came off without a hitch. So.
Yeah, this one's real life. And I think as well, last time, Benjamin, the detractors, they went through everything, and I think including my interview with you. So I have no doubt that they're watching this. So I hope they enjoyed that, and I hope they can find some sentences that they can decontextualise and turn into a Daily Mail article. That'd be great, guys. Let's keep this issue in the public domain.
You don't sound bitter about the persecution. There's a lot of different ways to process that, and it seems like you've taken it in stride, which shows a true character of you inside of your heart. Yeah.
Well, they're entitled to their opinion. I just wish some of them would have the ovaries to invite me on their shows and debate me.
Yeah.
That would be good. Let's do it, guys.
They haven't
have
done
it out.
Well,
no, the big platforms that sort of really smashed me, like ABC and say The Panel, which is a TV show on Channel 10. No, they might have invited me through the Liberal Party, which didn't filter down to me, but
yeah.
No, I'd be very happy to talk about this issue. Bring it on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. I can't wait to see what you'll be up to. But thank you for your time, and it's always great to hang out with you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Benjamin. Been loving your shows. So, good luck with everything.